Good conversation about the news. Anytime you like. News on the Rocks.
Here's to Steve Reifman, F.T. Burke. I'm glad these guys are
Reefer
here with
man.
us, Patty. You know, this guy's smart. He knows. People call him Reifman, R-E-I-F. No, it's Reifman, like reefer man.
Right.
And who's a better reefer man than somebody who not only went to Woodstock, but then decided to keep the party going for as long as he could?
My God. I read the list of places that you went, and I didn't get a copy of the book ahead of time, but I feel like I know it because I'm looking at all the places you went. And the more I read, the more jealous I became.
Right.
What an amazing experience for a young kid. I mean, that must have been just seminal for you.
Yes. And Wander is an apt name for the book because I really didn't know where I was going next.
That's the best way to travel.
It just evolved.
Yeah.
Especially my first excursion down into Morocco. I mean, that was itself life-changing. You cross into this Muslim, Arabic, French, crazy
marketplace.
And there's also the Berbers live there.
Right.
But it's so exotic, and everybody wears the long gowns with the big hood. They all look like a bunch of monks.
Yeah.
Well, okay, there's so much to say. I don't even know where to start. But you're talking about how people dressed in various countries, Muslim countries. Didn't they about run you out of one of those countries on a rail because you were this long-haired hippie American freak who did not show any modesty?
Yes, I had a very interesting and actually somewhat frightening experience in Beirut, Lebanon, near the famous Pigeon Rocks. Those are the ones, if you ever go into a Lebanese restaurant, they always show the rocks sticking out in the ocean there.
Yep, yeah.
So I'm walking along. It was my first day in Beirut. I'm about 7 months into this travel. I had just spent a couple months in Israel. In order to get from Israel to Lebanon, I had to go to Cyprus because you couldn't go direct. And you had to make sure your passport did not say Israel on it or you couldn't get in. Wow. So I kept it clean. I used a special card. I said, would you please stamp it when I came into the country on there? Because I'm an archaeology student, I told him. I had to go to Egypt.
Right.
So anyway, that was a bit of a story.
Well,
but
you could lie in those days.
A little bit. I tell you, though, I got to the point where I wouldn't do it anymore because I had lies backfire on me on the road.
Yeah.
So what happens is I'm walking along. It's my first day. All of a sudden, there's a group around me, and my hair is really wild. Well, the picture on the cover of the book is actually my hair.
That's actually you here?
And it is.
But rainbow? Not rainbow?
Well, it wasn't rainbow. It was red ringlets.
Oh, how
Shirley
cute.
Temple
how
type.
adorable. Wow.
And they were lovely. Of course, going into Morocco, they made me cut my hair twice on the beach, which is reflected in our novel.
Wow.
An accurate story. And such that. So I get my hair cut the first I got. I'm with two Swiss German fellows that I met going down the Spanish coast.
Right.
And we go up to the border. We found out that you could get to Morocco cheaply by going to a Spanish city on the northern coast of Africa, which is really in Morocco physically, but it is still Spain.
Right.
So we had to walk 4 kilometers to get to the border.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Not bad.
No.
The raging sea next to us, gray Mediterranean Sea, waves, and I go up to them, I'm going to get through. I know I can. People are coming back the other way going, I couldn't get in, the long hairs, I'm getting in,
Right.
So we get up there, and I look at this guy, and he looks at me with his snipping. Oh, no, go back, get a haircut, geez. I said, I knew this one fella. He was one of these super prepared travelers, Oliver Schwartz.
Okay.
And he grabs a hold of some scissors he pulls out of his Swiss Army pack.
Oh, my God.
Which was fur covered, okay? The Swiss guys had these fur covered packs. Mine was like this grubby old green army pack,
Yeah, sure.
And he pulls out his scissors and he gives me a huge haircut. I walk back to this fella with a handful of curls, like masses of them. He goes, no, more.
Oh, boy.
Go back to the beach. Now a busload of American straight...
He wants an army cut.
Yeah, that's what he wants, but I wasn't going to give him that.
No.
A busload of American straight tourists pulls up, and they see what's going on, and they are laughing and yelling at me and all this. So I went back, and they got me in, My hair wasn't truly short. It was bouncy, but it was a lot shorter, but I got into Morocco. And that really was That's transformative. And the first time that I heard the Mazayan call from the tower,
Yeah.
what is going? It chills your bones.
And how old were you at the time?
22 at that point.
You were a baby.
Yeah.
And so you hit, from what I can tell, about 35 countries during that time. And what motivated that was Woodstock what motivated that? Or did you just go to Woodstock and say, I'm going to do this? Or did you have that in your plan that I'm going to stop at Woodstock and then take off for...
Well, it wasn't until a year later that I made the travel.
Oh, okay.
So it had to ferment.
It had to ferment.
Yes, right. So one of the big things about those days was the Vietnam War.
Sure.
And I was on a student deferment.
Okay.
The student deferment, if I didn't go to school, they'd be drafting me.
Right.
So I had to have that, 2S, I think it was.
Yeah.
So I had to go the next year. But the answer to your question is, it was wanderlust. Mm-hmm. It was reading National Geographic since I was knee high.
We all did.
Yeah, and I used to go downtown to Detroit in these sleazy bookstores and buy used ones for a nickel.
Right. The ones I know. My grandmother had a collection of them from the 19 teens, and I used to look at those. I was just always so fascinated with that
corset.
That exotic kind of travel,
Yeah.
And that was really what you did. I know that you spent some time in Nepal.
Yes.
What was that like? Could you breathe?
That was the greatest.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it was really a hippie's dreamland.
I would think.
Although it's so funny because I just read another excellent book about those days called The Bone Man of Benares by a guy named Terry Tarnoff.
Yeah.
And he does some incredible descriptions because he spent months in Nepal because he had money because he was a professional harmonica player and could get gigs, right? I had no talent like that.
Is there a lot of call for harmonica players?
Well, according to his book, every once in a while, someone would see him at a bar and he'd play and he'd get a deal,
Yeah.
But me, I didn't have those talents. So he found out easily, though, you could simply bribe the officials and stay as long as you wanted to stay. I got a 15-day visa, and I had to extend it twice.
Right.
And then I had to leave, I thought.
Yeah.
Of course, I also had to leave because my trip was framed by being forced to buy, here in New York City, I came from Detroit, flew here for $16 on American Airlines.
Sure.
It was a student fare.
Wow.
Come to New York, find my Icelandic Air ticket, Loflighter Air, $118. They say, do you need a round trip? No. Come over, get off at Luxembourg. That's where you had to fly. You stopped in Reykjavik.
Oh, I was going to say,
Got to stop. That was only in the airport, but I count it.
Right. Yeah,
go
of
to
course.
Luxembourg, which no one would want to go to necessarily, but that was the cheapest flight.
Right.
So I get in there and they say, you need a return ticket, young man. You look like hell, and we're not letting you in this country looking like that without a return ticket.
Yeah. All right.
So, okay, so I bought it for another $118. Well, it had a 1-year expiration on it. So that kind of motivated me. I found out eventually that I could have gone into their ticket
system
bureau and just get the money back. But I didn't find it out till I was in Morocco. And I had to go to Zurich, and I didn't get there till 11 and a half months later. And when I did, I got my $118 back.
So this whole trip took place within a year?
It's a classic 1 year. Wow. Starts at home October 1st, 1970. I think I got back October 5th, 1971.
As new and modern as you felt, the funny part of it is if you go back 100 years, 200 years, that was common for young men to do this long, extended tour of the whole continent and over into Asia. But that was like if you had the money and you came from that kind of a family, you could do that. And so did you come from that kind of family that they could fund fabulous places for you to stay?
No. I had $800 I had saved up from house painting.
Right.
And I took $500 with me, kept $300 back for my brother to send me when I needed it, which I needed pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then he sent me maybe another $500 as I guess a loan. I'm not sure I ever paid him back, but he kept me. He wanted me to keep going.
Did you work while you were over there?
I worked two places, both in the country of Israel. I worked on a kibbutz, which is a communal farm. And I stayed there about 7 weeks, and they paid me one Israeli lira, 27 cents a day. But they also gave you a place to stay, all the food you wanted. And when I left there, I walked off with a satchel full of grapefruits, which kept me going for days on the road. You could eat and drink. It was like having a canteen that was food.
Right, that's true, yeah.
But then I also worked one day.
How'd you score your food and your weed and your hash and all those things you needed to survive
Without getting arrested.
Without getting arrested, number one. And number two, just having the money to get all that stuff and stay at a hostel and transportation.
It was cheap, right?
It was on the cheap. I mean, here's the key to it. When you get into truly exotic places, they become exotically cheap.
Yeah.
You know, Afghanistan, literally 10 cents a night for a bed.
Yeah.
It might have been with 11 other people, but it was a bed.
So you paid too much is what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe.
My brother went over to Europe in between college and law school in the 70s, and he was like sleeping in cornfields in France and things like that. So there was, especially in those days, there wasn't the chasing you down and figuring out what you're trying to do here kind of attitude.
Well, yes and no. Like, for instance, at that time, General Franco was Generalissimo Franco was still the head of Spain. I mean, this guy was a fascist from World War II.
Sure, of
before
course.
World War II.
He was still there in the 70s?
Yes, he was.
Wow.
And he had a special police force called the Guardia Civil. And they wore these hats that looked like Mickey Mouse ears. And they looked absolutely ridiculous.
But you didn't make fun of them.
They were mean guys, though.
Yeah, yeah.
And they, in fact, of course, arrested me and 4 other guys on a little island called Formentera and took our passports because we were swimming naked, nude on the beach.
I can't believe you said that on our show.
Where'd you put your stash if you were swimming naked?
Well, Spain was a tough place. You know, we asked that question. You could hardly find. Spain was tough. Guardia Civil, and it was kind of old world.
Yeah.
But I do remember buying hashish on a train, some brown, horrible, dark
stuff.
It was hard, it wasn't any good. So you snuck it here and there.
Right.
But eventually, and when we were being evicted, I call it evicted, thrown off of this little island of Formentera,
Right.
me and 3 of our group were swimming. A 5th fellow was back with all of our stuff, yes, hanging it. And the Guardia Civil comes up, and he just succumbs. I would have been fighting him.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he succumbed.
Yes, we're evil. Take all our stuff. We have tons of drugs.
And gives up all of our passports to them.
Oh, no.
So we get back there, and we're like, uh-oh. And they say, you want your passports back? One of us could speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Come to this little town and the constabulary, and we were forced march for 5 or 6 miles. We go there, they go, no, you can't get those now. Go to the boat. You're going back to the big island. That's Ibiza, which is a much more famous island.
Sure, of course.
So they forced us to sleep in this kind of fish hole, I call it, stinking of fish.
Yeah.
You couldn't even get a hotel room if you wanted to, because in Spain, you had to give them your passport to get a hotel room.
And so you just still didn't have your passport?
No. So we get up, and I can't sleep, because why? Somebody had given my sleeping bag away back in Barcelona. So
somebody had given it away.
Yeah, that's a long story too. It's in the book. I lose my sleeping bag, so I'm sleeping with space blankets. That the Swiss guys had everything. These 2 guys, but they really did not keep you warm.
Yeah.
But I get up in the morning because I can't sleep because I'm freezing.
Yeah.
And I go off this little cafe, and there's Spanish hippies. Whoever knew there
Yay.
were any, And
How
these guys
festive.
came up with some great hashish.
I love
and
it.
I had a glorious morning on the Formentera Island and going back on the boat.
And how'd you get your passports back?
Well, when we went back to the island, and we had to report to the Guardia Civil.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that was like a little police station, and they said, you want your passport back? We need a ticket off the island. Come back with your ticket.
Wow.
Okay, they were trying to control us.
Yeah, sure.
So we came back and we got our passports. But we did not wind up going to where they told us. They said, go back to Barcelona. Said, we're not going back to Barcelona. We're going to Morocco,
Woo!
So we went on down the line. And, of course, one of the things that was interesting is we wind up at Valencia, Orange Place.
Orange Place.
And then we go from there to Granada. And Granada has a most incredible place called the Alhambra,
Right.
which is palaces
Exquisite.
and temples and mosques and all kinds of things. And we went and visited that and really got the flavor of the power of the Islamic movement, the empires, and all these kinds of things. So that was our first taste of real Islam, because in those days, the Islamic people had not come to Europe. You can read about it every day in the paper. The populations are filling up.
It was very a pocket, really, in those days.
It was enclosed in a sense.
Right, yeah.
So that's why when we went to Morocco and experienced it, it was such a wow. It's like today we live in the Detroit area. Dearborn, Michigan has huge Arabic populations
Right,
and has
right.
many mosques, and there's many mosques in the whole metropolitan Detroit area.
Sure.
Not in those days, though.
No.
You were a young guy in search of adventure, but also in search of female companionship.
Oh.
For sure.
How'd that work
Duh.
out for you?
Really difficult. Because when you got to the more exotic places, it was very difficult. First of all, you weren't going to really deal with a local Afghani girl.
Right. You're going to get skinned alive if you do.
First of all, you couldn't see them.
Right.
Because they wore burqas.
Yeah,
and
sure.
and
Just
you could
that
only see through a
slit.
screen, and you could hardly even see their eyes.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Second of all, there was no chance. They were hidden away. The men were on the streets.
And it was unsafe if you did go.
I
after
think
them.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't, but I
there-
didn't really
there-
have an opportunity. So what would happen is there were a few Western girls,
Mm-hmm.
relatively like maybe 5 to 1 to 10 to 1.
Right.
And that made it very challenging. And I wasn't exactly the boldest young man. Although
Challenging.
Yeah.
You learned from the Italian guys, didn't you?
Oh, yes, I did.
They knew what they were doing.
Those guys are amazing.
Aren't they?
Yeah.
I always tell this story. One time I was driving to the airport in Rome, and I got to this toll booth, and I put my credit card in, and it didn't come back out, and somebody started speaking to me in very lackadaisical Italian, but I didn't know what they were talking about. And this guy in a truck, I thought, oh my, he's going to start honking at me. And instead, this gorgeous Italian guy gets out, and he walks over, and he says, and he speaks to me in Italian. And I said, I don't speak Italian. And he said, oh, princessa. He said, what is the problem? And I told him, and he said, un momento. And he talks to the guy in a very animated Italian. And we sit there, and he pulls out a cigarette and leans against my car and just starts smoking. And within, 90 seconds to 2 minutes, my card pops back out. And I said, thank you. And he said, anything for you. And I went, oh, yes.
You're melting.
I was melting. The Italian men, boy, they have a way, don't they?
Yeah, so one of the things that's fascinating about the Hippy Trail when you got to Europe and to these other, also Africa and Asia, was it really was an international situation. Mm-hmm. Like I said, the Formentera Five, I call it, the group that got thrown off the island. We had a Canadian, we had another American, and 2 Swiss German. But when I get to the kibbutz in Israel, so the volunteers are segregated out, and they come from all over. So that's where I really got to know Italian guys, because there were guys that were there volunteering. And I'm telling you, there was no woman they wouldn't
make an attempt at.
Yeah, I was like, no discretion whatsoever.
No, none.
From it could be from Sophia Loren down to the lady on the street.
They appreciate femininity of
do.
any sort.
Well, it also increases your odds.
Yeah, well, sure,
if
whatever.
you hit on 100 women, and you're only
Absolutely.
2% successful.
And I read something recently about that, and apparently Italian men have a thing for their mothers, and it all starts there.
Oh, yikes.
Yikes.
Was that guy looking at me like I was his mother? I was only in my 20s.
You had to go and ruin it, Steve, didn't
Yeah,
you?
thank
Sorry.
God. Well,
I will tell you one other funny thing, though. So after I traveled, I spent about a month in Morocco, and myself and an American young lady, we hitchhiked across North Africa.
So you did hook up.
That was pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a platonic relationship.
Okay.
I swear.
Sure.
Anyway, we slept in the same room for weeks. Mm-hmm. But we go across North Africa and we get to Sicily, and Sicily was quite exciting. We had some fun
beautiful.
stuff in the book and pretty wild.
You will note in the book, Patty, when you get to it, the foursome.
Yeah, you'll remember that.
The foursome, but we don't need to get into that
Whoa,
right
whoa,
now.
whoa.
We can make that.
A couple of Sicilian women picked me and my friend up. Anyway.
For fun and games?
We didn't get as far as the book got, but we had some fun. I'll leave it at that.
All right.
But we go from Sicily, we go to the very toe, which is Reggio Calabria. Mm-hmm. It's the toe of the boot of Italy. Okay. And some guys say, well, where are you going to sleep? Because we were sleeping here and there.
Right.
Oh, go sleep in these beach houses. They're abandoned, go in there. But these 2 Italian guys come out, and then their friends come out, and they keep speaking Italian to us. Uh-huh. And we keep going, no capisco, no capisco, no capisce. We don't know what to say.
Right.
And they insisted if they would keep speaking Italian, they
That
were
you
certain
suddenly-
we were
Eventually
going to
you'll get it.
understand.
Yeah.
You'll hear, like, if we enunciate, you'll understand our language.
Just keep on saying it. We're going to understand Italian.
Right. How
But
funny.
the international flavor of the whole travel for everybody, because I think that we Americans are responsible for the hippie movement in many ways.
Sure.
Although I credit the Beatles
Yeah.
I blame them and credit them for starting the whole thing. But I still think it was the Americans that picked it up. Levi's. I mean, you understand what Levi's were to Europeans?
Yeah.
In those days, they were worth $100 and they were selling for $12 at the store here in America.
Yeah,
Because you
no,
couldn't get them.
it's true. My brother was in Russia back in those days, and he was in the military, and somehow in Russia, interesting, and he spoke or speaks fluent Russian, and so he said it was unbelievable. He said you could literally strip naked because they wanted to buy everything on your body, including the jeans, for an enormous price,
Right.
especially in a communist country in those days. It was really
I
pretty
think I'm wearing
wild.
Levi's right now. Anybody want them?
Yeah.
I'll leave them on. don't worry.
I wore a pair when I went over, and I swear I don't know what happened. I think they turned into rags, frankly.
Probably, you're right.
Because one of my best adventures was, so I spend 10 weeks in Israel, and by the way, besides the kibbutz, had an incredible time going to Jerusalem and down to the Red Sea, and just fantastic time, and it was very spiritual for me.
Yeah.
I was looking for spiritual stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Because when I was in Jerusalem, first somebody gave me the New Testament and the Old Testament.
Right.
Then somebody traded those in. I got another Bible, and by the time I was through, they gave me a beautiful little pocket Bible from the Mount Zion Temple or something.
Right.
And these guys came to us, and I was with an American girl at that point,
Right.
and they made us read all these passages from the Bible, which were because they were Christians.
Right.
Now, I'm born a Jew, blood-wise.
Right.
I don't consider myself to be religious, but I do consider myself to be spiritual,
Right.
especially because of my journeys.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, I'm like, wow, this is so crazy. People giving me Bibles.
Yeah.
So when these guys come to give us a little like travel Bible,
Yeah.
and they're saying, okay, find this part in Elijah, and I'm reading, I go, Jesus. And so many of these really spiritual things happened to me in Jerusalem in a matter of just several days. I felt like God was chasing me down the streets.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting how, and you don't have to attach it to a religion. There is a sense sometimes, especially when you're exposing yourself to things you've never seen before or felt before, that you feel the universe speak to you. And those places like that, really.
Especially in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Jerusalem is a place where, everyone who goes there, first of all, it's filled with American evangelical types.
Yeah.
And if you're not converted, they want to convert you. So one of the things that happened, and it's portrayed in the book, is a friend of mine, of course, in Israel, Lebanese hashish was a prominent feature in the culture.
Right.
I don't know how they were getting it through, but they were. And when we get to Jerusalem, after being in South on the Red Sea, we wind up meeting some fellow, and he making a hashish deal in the Garden of the Tomb is going to get consummated.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were friends of his, and he thought he was getting ripped off because he had
Right.
given somebody some money in advance.
Yeah.
And we go in there, and we wind up going into the tomb itself.
Yeah.
And there I am getting converted. I mean, by a fellow from Kentucky, a couple from Iowa,
The
And-
Holy Spirit entered you.
Oh, yes. They did. And they put their hands on me.
Oh,
you know,
wow. Wow.
let this young man go to the Mount of Olives and meet Rabbi, blah, blah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
give the Lord's message to this young man.
Wow.
When you think of all the places you visited, that trail you took, the Hippy Trail,
Yeah.
that's something that couldn't happen today, could it? We're all so tight with security and everything's got to be documented and digitized.
And you're being followed, and you fear, or could it?
You
Or
realize how
Well-
lucky you are? That couldn't happen now.
Two things. One, it was very difficult even then.
Yeah.
To think it was easy. I mean, I hitchhiked in Iran. Now, Iran had a king,
yeah,
or it was the Shah, excuse
Shah,
me.
right?
But it's still, and the people were very aggressive in Iran also. Against
Aggressive meaning,
Westerners.
oh, they didn't like you.
In fact, I wound up on my way east, going towards India and Nepal,
Right.
I wound up in a special, and it's portrayed well in the book by Fred. Did a great. You should say something, Fred. my writer, my co-writer, and actually the author of the book, F.T. Burke, Mr. Frederick Burke, is with me here today. Of course, Fred, say something.
Say,
Hello, everybody. As you can see, Steve can go on and on with
I
his
know,
talking
which-
about this, and it was amazing for me to hear these stories and to actually put it together. And what I did
I'll
is
bet.
I put a list together of all the events, the circumstances, the people that he met all through his whole journey. And then I used those as plot points when I put the story together, because I had to create the dialogue and make it all
Right.
work.
Well,
as
thank God he had a
novel.
good journal, huh?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, that
And
must have
it
been
was from,
fascinating.
I had 2 relatively copious journals that I kept. And Fred had that as raw material besides being able to interview me. And it's amazing the things that I did write down and the things I didn't write down. Some of my best stories I didn't mention.
Yeah, he tells me, he says, why didn't you put that in there? Oh, you could have done this. Well, it
That
would have
wasn't
been
in
a
the-
1,400-page book.
But that's a problem too, yeah.
Multi-volume.
But I do want to finish what I was starting to say to you, though. So I'm going across Iran,
Yeah.
and in order to get into Afghanistan, which was really my target,
Right.
the Hippy Trail itself, I want to define that a little bit first, because you asked the question about the trail. I think it probably is most characteristic of Istanbul to
Right.
Kathmandu, Nepal.
Right. Right.
And that was across Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nepal.
Who blazed
Right.
that
Yeah.
trail? How did it come to be?
Good question. I think it was Europeans, frankly. I think they had the advantage on us. You know, we had to hop over the ocean and get across another
So
continent of
European
Europe.
hippies were first to do it.
I think so. I really believe that.
So is that a hippie trail, or if historically is that like a trade kind of trail?
Well, I think a lot of it was.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, when you're going from Turkey into Iran,
Yeah.
there's only one way to go.
Right.
There's a cut in the mountains. And there's a
exactly.
pass, and there's a town called Maku. It's a little tiny town where I had miserable times both times I was there. One of my theories on travel is, though, that if someone asks you if you like a place, it's really what happened to you there.
Right. Right.
But the second time I went there, a fellow saw me on the street. And you got to understand, I'm like a stinking hippie. I mean, my hair is knotted.
Not now. You're not.
No, I'm clean.
We should
I'm a lawyer now.
We should-
That is crazy, by the way, that you became a lawyer after all of your experiences.
Well, I had aspirations of law school before I went. And I actually literally had, I believe God told me to go to law school.
Yeah.
And in Kabul, Afghanistan.
Wow.
You got to go to certain places to have God talk
I got
to
a
you.
brother who's a lawyer who spent several years in Kabul, so I understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
yeah.
but anyway, I do want to say this. So I'm going across Iran, and it's tough. I mean, they hated America
Right.
because we put the Shah into power, which
right.
is a true thing.
Well, of course we did.
And they really were they didn't like us. On the other hand, I remember being on a bus with a doctor. First thing, the Shah, we hate him, we hate America. But by the time he's done, he's coming to Chicago. Can I fix him up with some women? Okay, sure, doc. But anyway, I wander across. So you have to get a visa to get into Afghanistan. My passport has special pages on it that pull out. You had to actually attach pages
Yeah.
because many of these countries have full-page visas, so you fill up your passport pretty quickly.
Right.
So anyway, I'm going to the last town called Mashhad. Now, Mashhad is a famous pilgrimage spot for the Shia Muslim.
Okay. Right. Right.
And I get in there, and I'm with the same Pakistani fellows I was mentioning to you earlier. And these guys were traveling in my way of travel.
Right.
And we're getting into town, and they say to me, you can't get a visa today. It's a holy day, and everything's shut down, so will be the visa office.
Yeah.
So we get in, and it's a pilgrimage day. There are literally thousands and thousands of pilgrims coming from all over Iran and other places because the Shias are beyond Iran, but mostly in Iran.
Right.
And they're starting these parades. These fellows are wearing these black silk uniforms with these big decals on them and colors and stuff.
Yeah.
They cut off a sheep's head. The blood spills on the street, and these legions of men, like lined up like 10 across, 10 back, start going across the blood and reaching towards the central mosque. Now, I had a jalaba which was the gown from Morocco.
Right.
And I had a kafaya, which is the headdress of the Arabs from Syria.
Right.
I bought it in Syria. So they said, put your stuff on. They knew I had it. Because if I went in there with my wild Western looks, they would have killed me, I think. I mean, it literally could have been killed, literally.
Wow.
And they told me to cover up. So I went through this awe-inspiring experience of just walking into the temple and my jaw dropping and just, wow, what is going on here? The next day, I went back to get my visa. And even though the holiday, the holy day was over, supposedly, there were still guys marching around beating themselves with chains.
Wow. Yeah.
30 hours later.
Yeah.
And such that I couldn't go on certain sides of the street because that was still the people flailing themselves.
Wow.
So it was very intense.
Where were your parents in all this?
Good question. My mother was home. My
Right.
father had passed away several years
I'm
before
sorry.
that.
Yeah, okay.
And I think I'm sorry too, but I think it made it easier for me
freed
to be
you
a hippie.
in this, yeah.
You know, I don't think my father would have liked my hair.
Was your mother worried about this endeavor, or was she like, you know what, go out and find yourself?
I had a very interesting mother. She was kind of loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
She didn't tell us when to come home at night. So she was cool about that. But the thing that happened to me on the way back was interesting. So, you know, I would write like once a month. Okay. And I think I talked to them on the phone twice during the whole journey.
Wow.
But that was a big deal.
Yeah, sure.
You had to go to a post office at 4 o'clock in the morning or something. You know, it's like everything was crazy. And there was no phones. There were no cell phones. There were no credit cards.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how I did it. I don't
It's
know how
amazing to
anybody
think.
did.
I know. Even going for an afternoon without our phone, it's like, how did we manage 6 hours without our cell phone?
No, and you're absolutely right. If you traveled in those days, you had to have like money wired to an American Express office.
Traveler's checks
or
were an item.
traveler's checks, yeah.
And American money,
It
of course, is
wasn't-
the big deal in the world. It still is, and
Yeah.
it was then. If you had a $100 bill, you know,
Yeah.
and you go into these, and there was black market trading for money. In fact, one of the stories that Fred tells in the book is going into India, and I get busted for carrying. You're not supposed to bring any money into India.
Huh.
You know, no cash.
Wow.
But she let me have it, though. She
Yeah.
let me out.
She-
I was only arrested several times.
That's pretty good.
First in London, then our Formentera with the Guardia Civil in Spain. I got arrested in Cyprus.
Cool.
Cyprus was interesting because they had the Greeks and the Turks.
Right,
and if you were with
sure.
a Turk, the Greek wouldn't talk to you. And if you were with a Turk, the Greeks wouldn't talk to you.
Yeah, right.
So you had to figure out who you're best off with. Now, the Turks, it was cheaper to live in the Turkish area, so I went with the Turks.
Right. Well, so after all of this, you're a year into it and it's wrapping up. What's the end game? What is the big takeaway from this trip?
I think the big takeaway is that people all over are really pretty great.
Yeah.
The hospitality, I mentioned because it's kind of fun to talk about a few of the skirmishes and problematic things. I mean, I had a thing where I had hundreds of kids chasing me with stones in Fez, Morocco.
Oh, how great they are.
And finally some old man came out and shoot them off, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's a little scary because even little kids, there's hundreds of them, you know. I was a schoolyard I walked across.
Yeah.
But I think the takeaway is I'm a joyous person. I have to admit it's kind of a natural thing for me.
Right.
But I found joy in it. I found that people were hospitable, generally. I found that you could smile. In fact, I'm thinking that I may write an autobiography that will only include this as a few chapters, and I'm going to call it Armed with a Smile. I think if you walk around smiling and you nod your head and you say thank you and you learn how to count to 10, amazingly enough, you can get along in India.
Isn't it amazing how powerful kindness is? It
Yes.
really is. People think that that if you're kind and you're gentle, it's a sign of weakness, and it's actually the greatest strength.
When
It
you left
really-
on this trip in October of 1970, you had your whole future ahead of you. Now it's 50 years in the rearview mirror, just about. How did things turn out? How did the world turn out as you were hoping it would, compared to as you were hoping it would?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I remember when the Soviet Union fell, and I thought to myself, we don't have any enemies. This is unbelievable.
Oh,
It didn't seem like we did.
Then
look
again,
look all this happened since then.
we always look. It is amazing because people always want an enemy because an enemy unites your core, and I think that's exactly what happens. As soon as one falls, we're looking for the next one. Hate to say that, but that seems to be the way of human beings.
But now we have this amorphous enemy. You know, the guerrilla tactics and all these. And even you have enemies within our midst, you know, all this craziness here with these mass shootings.
Yeah.
So that stuff, I have to admit, it leaves me shaken a little bit. But I have to confess, I'm a political figure. You know, I actually ran for Congress in 2004, won a primary, ran against an incumbent a Republican who I wasn't going to beat, but nobody else seemed to want to run. So I believe in the political process. I believe that both sides are important, although I am a Democrat.
Yeah, no, that's
Oh, I'm here in New
fooled
York.
me.
I guess I can say that, right?
You're safe here.
But I
really,
think
did that fool you?
I'm still optimistic, though. I'm a very optimistic person, and I think that somehow, some way, the better part of human nature is going to survive. I think the biggest challenge we have today is the internet.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, wow, who's going to control it?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure because it seems like the devious ones seem to be doing a little bit better job than the positive ones. at this
In the
point.
short game. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think a positive message wins overall. I'm a happy guy. I love my family. I got a great family, a wonderful wife, and I enjoy being a lawyer.
Was she in that foursome? No, I'm sorry. None of my business. I don't need to
Oh,
know.
that's
I will
incredible.
I'll tell you something that wasn't in the book, and it's a great story about my wife, Pam. She actually drove me to the airport to come to New York with my little sister because they were best friends, 6 grades younger than me.
Wow.
So I come back here, and she's almost 18.
So on the initiation of the trip, she was there.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
she was.
sweet.
She took me
Wow.
to the airport.
Wow.
And she wasn't my girlfriend. I had another girl, sort of, you know.
Yeah.
And then I come back, and this young lady
She's
who was only 16 now is almost 18, you know.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And my sister fixed us up.
And you're so worldly at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And my wife is great. She says, I really like him, but I think he's too wild for me. And we're still having that struggle on
there's
a
nothing
day-to-day
like,
basis. you know?
Nothing like a wild guy.
I love that you're still wild. Don't
Yeah.
ever,
A little bit,
Don't
you know?
ever change, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm enjoying myself in life, though.
Steve Reifman. And I'm glad I was going to ask you how to pronounce it, but you already explained it to me with the whole reefer thing.
What kind of lawyer are you, by the way?
At this point in history, I'm doing motor vehicle accident victims' personal injury claims
Oh, interesting.
under
Okay.
no-fault law in Michigan.
Okay,
Well,
cool.
you should buy some commercials on this radio station.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Everybody else has.
I'm
Right.
telling you.
And
Lawyers
FT,
know how to advertise.
Fred Burke, the guy who put the words and the poetry, the
Oh.
prose, and all that to it.
Wonderful.
Good having you
wonderful.
here, too.
Yes, thank you very much. I didn't say much because this guy, he just goes on and on, on and on and on.
Hey, the
But it's
story's
wonderful.
well up.
Yes.
All right. Well, listen, I'm not sure what you're going to do for an encore, but I can't wait to figure it out and
Yeah.
hear about it someday.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thank you, both
Thank
of
you, Patty.
Clear thinking and just a little drinking. News on the rocks.